So we have the most recent, and up to this point, final film in Sony's Spider-Man universe, or as I prefer to call it now, the pseudo-Spider-Man universe, because there's no Spider-Man to be found, Craven the Hunter. This is also the third one to come out this year, which is kind of insane that they had so many films while the MCU only put out one. But, yeah, and DC only had one big blockbuster as well, and it was, unfortunately, Joker 2, but that's besides the point. And just like most of the others, especially the ones outside of the Venom movies, it's been getting torched on the internet. And much like those other two, it's failing at the box office badly. This only made about $11 million in its opening weekend. Thankfully, it at least beat out that crappy Lord of the Rings animated movie, but that's really the only praise I can give its box office performance. And I have a feeling this is going to go to streaming real quick. But I decided to throw this movie a bone and go see it in theaters, because I've seen all of these movies in the theaters. Yes, really. So, yeah. And if you guys know, I was actually really looking forward to this film. This was on my most anticipated list for 2024, because I normally at least think the movies are decent, except for Madam Web. That one's garbage. But even Morbius, I didn't think was that bad. And it seems like the more people I talk to who aren't quote-unquote critics seem to think the movie was fine. Like, they don't think it was great, but it's all the big critics and the YouTubers and all this other shit that crapped on Morbius because it was a popular thing to do so. And they're largely doing the same thing here. And I'll be honest, this was decent. I thought this was good. Now, obviously, again, I'm somebody who generally seemed to like these movies fine, again, except for Madam Web, so it shouldn't really be a surprise to anybody that I didn't hate this movie. Now, it does have one really, really big problem. Actually, well, there's another problem pretty big problem I have, but it's not exactly as major as you think. But I'll get to that one in a minute. My big problem with this movie is, unfortunately, it's the writing. Now, it's not that the dialogue is absolutely awful. It's really not. It's just kind of generic most of the time. Every once in a while, we'll get some really well-written scenes, but most of the time, it's just it's a very generic story is the main problem. Really the majority of this plot is, well, actually I say the majority, but it doesn't happen till like halfway through, where Craven has to go rescue his brother Dimitri, who has been captured by the Rhino. And one thing I can give these writers that I could really tell while watching the film is that this movie seems to be very ambitious. I gave the same praise to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game, even though that's a game it's something I like, but I will acknowledge is not the best written. But much like that game, you can tell these writers were big fans of the comics, because there's a lot of references to other characters and other things throughout the Spider-Man universe, and they're not look at what we did. It's a kind of just there and it's gone that kind of tries to expand the universe a little bit. Like, for example, the Rhino states that he went to a doctor to go try to become stronger, because his backstory is that his backstory is kind of dumb and involves him and Craven's father. I'm not going to get into it because it's dumb, but either way, he goes to a doctor who And he ends up, of course, getting some kind of formula that turns him into the Rhino, and he actually has to keep some kind of serum on hand to keep him human, because it's incredibly painful to have your skin as hard as it is and become basically a human Rhino, which, obviously. And the doctor he went to is named Miles Warren, who, if you don't know, is also a Spider-Man villain known as the Jackal. And then there's another villain in this movie. Obviously, the main villain in this movie was the Rhino, but there's references to others. Like, there's obviously another Daily Bugle reference, because that's, like, the easiest thing to do in these movies. Like, Venom Let There Be Carnage did the same thing. There's also a villain in this movie who's named the Foreigner, who is a very minor villain in the comics. But I had no idea he was even going to be in this movie. And he just kind of showed up, and he actually had a stake in the plot. He wasn't just there to say, oh, look, a name that some Spider-Man fans would recognize. And his brother, obviously, who is the Chameleon, they do something clever with that character, trying to set him up, where throughout the movie, what his chameleon thing is that he can do basically an impression of anybody, which is a solid idea. And then he also goes to a doctor, like he says, who I'm assuming was Miles Warren, because the Rhino, when he was explaining his backstory involving Warren, he was explaining it to Dimitri. And he actually becomes the Chameleon at the end of the movie. Like with the white, like he briefly turns into Craven at the end of the movie, and it has the transformation effect with the white mask and everything. So I appreciate that they went all the way with that. They didn't just kind of dance around it the entire time like Madam Web did with some things. But the other problem I had with this movie that I'm going to get into, because a lot of this I did like, and it's something that you wouldn't expect me to complain about with this movie, but it's the audio dubbing. For some reason, these editors had a really hard time syncing the audio with the characters' lip movements. Now, I've done short films now because I'm a film student, so I know that audio dubbing is not exactly the easiest thing to do. One, it's incredibly tedious and a pain in the ass to do, but it's not rocket science. Like, I've had to take other takes and match it up with what's on screen from an entirely different take. Yeah, that's hard to do, or at least you have to be very delicate with how you do it. So I understand it's not the simplest thing in the world, but like I said, this is not a hard problem, especially when me and the other guy who were editing it, we had no budget, comparing it to a movie that had a budget of, I think I saw it was like estimated like $70 million. And it's not like the budget should affect the audio dubbing because it's using assets you already have. It's the video and the audio, which were already captured either on set or in a studio. So there's no excuse for this. And there's several takes that I can tell came out of the studio, because again, it doesn't match up with the lip movements, and it sounds incredibly robotic. It was especially a scene on a runway between Craven and Calypso. And by the way, that was the point where I started noticing Ariana DeBose's acting is off in this movie. I know she's a better actress than this. I've seen her do some good stuff, like West Side Story, for example. So I'm not bashing her as an actress, but I'm assuming it's mostly due to the crappy audio done, because when it actually syncs up properly, showing me that it was the same take, it sounds fine. Her line delivery is perfectly fine. But it seems like whenever they had to do some re-editing or something, I'm wondering if there was stuff cut from this movie or added to gel scenes together better because test screenings weren't very good. And that's why there's so much crappy dubbing, because they had to rush to get it done. Which would also explain why the movie was delayed 16 months, because if you don't remember, this was supposed to come out in August of last year. They used the strike as an excuse, but I have a feeling there were a lot of rewrites and reshoots and re-editing involved in this movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I should have gotten to like 5 minutes ago, he's good in this role, but it's very distracting with the lack of a Russian accent. Their father has a Russian accent, but him and his brother are American. Maybe I was gonna say maybe it was their mother's genes, like maybe she was an American, but anytime we see her, we only see her a little bit, but the only thing she does is speak Russian. Like, we see her in like an insane asylum. I don't think, like, this is shown almost like a flashback for Craven, but he wouldn't have seen this, but she only speaks Russian as well. She doesn't even speak English, much less with an American accent. So, and I know Aaron Taylor Johnson can do their accents, because one, he's actually British, and two, he did a kind of the Sokovian accent. I know Sokovia isn't a real place, but that's what it was supposed to be, in Age of Ultron, which was pretty close. So I don't understand why he couldn't do it here. And so, yeah, like Dimitri I could give a pass, because apparently he's like his half-brother or something. Like, he had a different mother, I guess. And so that one I could have let go. But it's really weird watching Craven the Hunter without a Russian accent. By the way, Russell Crowe, his Russian accent was very good. Russell Crowe's an actor who's recently, like the last 20 years, has gotten a reputation of not giving a shit in a lot of movies. But he actually tried his ass off in this one and did very well. I think he should actually voice Craven in some kind of whatever next like animated series they do or something. I think they should bring in Crow to voice Craven, because I think that voice, you put Crow's Russian accent, like that voice with the look of Aaron Taylor Johnson, I think you got a damn good Craven. Oh, and by the way, something I just remembered to point out, you know, you see this image right here behind me, where he's got the fur vest and everything, and that was made a big deal of the last shot of the trailer, kind of like the Aquaman trailer, where they made a big deal about the orange suit. That's only shown in the final few shots of the movie. Yeah, they pulled a Snake Eyes with this one. And these two shots right here of him outside with the fur coat, one of them with a torch and the other one with a bow and arrow, those shots are nowhere to be found. He's in his father's empty mansion, which I just realized is ending up being Craven's mansion, as it does look pretty similar to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game. And I bring that up a lot here because that one had Craven the Hunter as one of the main as one of the major villains in that one. Actually, he was kind of less of a villain in that one, but it doesn't matter. And that's the only scene he ever wears it, which is weird. Also, I find it funny that Calypso does not show up in the epilogue at all. She kills Foreigner and gives Craven the potion to keep him alive, and he goes off to go chase the Rhino, and then we never see Calypso again. Why? And I will say, a lot of these movies have their big, strong female lead or side character that always tries to overshadow the male character in these. This movie doesn't do that. I mean, she does kill Foreigner because he's poisoned Craven. But I think that scene works because, one, she's not some kind of Mary Sue that's good at everything. She just nails a pretty good shot with an arrow, and they kind of explain why she's good with a bow and arrow, but they also kind of leave it a little ambiguous. Like, what I mean is, like, there's more to the story than she's telling. So at least they give an explanation. This isn't a Mary Sue, Captain Marvel, or Rey scenario. She's actually a decent character in the film. She's not obnoxious. She doesn't do a bunch of stupid shit. So I appreciate that. And it's also refreshing having a very masculine hero in modern entertainment, because that's something that is apparently it's let's just say it's kind of dying out because toxic masculinity, and I heard that's like one of the big complaints a lot of people are pointing at this movie, is that it promotes toxic masculinity, and just go fuck yourself if you're gonna complain about the movie like that. So the best way I can describe this movie, okay, and I will say, the action is really good. It's well shot, well choreographed, and you can actually see there's no bullshit shaky cam, which I like. There's a little bit of shaky cam in there, I will say, but it seems to be done deliberately to kind of amp up the tension. It's a little irritating, but it works. The CGI is hit and miss. Sometimes it looks okay, sometimes it looks awful. Like, the Rhino does not look good. It looks fine for the budget, but again, it more ambitious than the budget was allowing. So, and the musical score was actually pretty cool, I will say that. I didn't hear, when I started actually trying to pay attention to the score, it was pretty decent. So, the best thing here's my verdict. If you're someone who gave Red One a positive review because, it's just a dumb action movie, who cares about the writing, and then turned around and said this was one of the worst movies of the year, I have to question your standards. I didn't really like Red One because I criticized the writing and the action, because I didn't think the action in that movie was that great anyway. And this one is if you're just going for the action like I wasn't expecting to get masterful writing out of this movie. And I didn't expect that out of any of these Sony films. But I got what I can. But here's basically the synopsis of my review. I got what I came for. I came for some cool action and at least some interesting ideas, and that's exactly what I got. So, all in all, this is probably going to seem like way too high of a score for some people, but again, when have I ever cared about that? I'm going to give Craven the Hunter a B+. I'm going to be ranking all of the Sony Spider-Man universe movies soon, and you all know what's going to be in last place, obviously, but I'll be doing that within a couple days, but I have some other reviews that I need to get to before the year ends. Like, Sonic 3 is out. Mufasa, ugh. I'm debating whether or not I see that one at all. So, that's all I got, and I'll see you all next time.